Thanks, everybody. Hey, real quick show of hands. How many people are here? All right, who's not here? All right, let's go. All right, well, thank you guys for showing up today. So what we're going to talk about is what makes a great portrait. And what's interesting about this is there is no official rule of what makes a great portrait. There's no international committee that convenes and says this is good and this is bad. I've been on the judging panel for so many photo competitions over the years all around the world, and I've seen so many great portraits, and I've seen some okay portraits, and I've seen someone like, huh? And so what I want to try to do in the hour that we have together today is we're going to talk about some very pragmatic things, some very regular run-of-the-mill things, but we're also going to talk about some bigger things about portrait photography that I hope at the end of this session will have you think differently about how you make portraits. Now, I do want to tell you how I'm going to do this. I want to be able to talk very frankly with you. There's a couple of topics that are going to be kind of controversial today. So I'm going to talk to you as if it's you and me at a bar. So we're just hanging out, a couple of friends at the bar, and you just say, hey, Scott, I'm getting into this portrait thing. What makes a great portrait? So I'm going to talk to you like that. It's going to be very casual and very frank. Now, I'm using a laptop, so this is more like maybe we're at Starbucks instead. So we're at Starbucks, we're just talking, we're hanging out. And also, if you see me holding my phone, it's in case I get bored, I can go on my Facebook page. No, I'm running my presentation from the phone, so that's why. Why is he holding a phone the whole time? That's why. All right, so I do want to talk about this. There is a very important technical aspect to portraiture, right? So, but I think it's one part technical. Of course, you're expected to have your camera stuff together. You're expected to know your settings, and if you're going to use flash or strobes or whatever, that's the entry point, right? And that's one part of it. But I think mostly when it comes to portraits are more like 3 parts art. All right, it's mostly art. It's art. It's really, that's what's going to make the difference. You're never going to have someone look at your portrait and go, man, your ISO was fantastic. That f-stop you chose, it brought a tear to my eye. Right? Those things, your shutter speed, 1/1000th of a second. You're never going to, you know what I mean? That's not, so the technical part has to be there. It has to be on it. But it's the other stuff, and that's what we're going to talk about a lot. In fact, what I'm going to do in this time is I'm going to go through 10 specific topics that I think will help. All of these are the building blocks. But I want to tell you about the first thing, and it's going to sound, for some of you, this is going to go, you already know it to death. But I've found that a lot of people get very confused when it comes to talking about portraits and what is a portrait. So if you'll just bear with me for the first few minutes, it's just number 1 of 10 things. But I want to talk about portrait styles, because there's a lot of confusion about this, and I have so many people that will ask me or call something the wrong name. So, and it'll also help you to figure out which one of these styles that you want to fit into. So we're going to just do real quickly just a style guide to what is a portrait, all right? So for example, this is a photo of a person, but I wouldn't really call that a portrait. That is fashion photography. And what's interesting about fashion photography is it's not about the person. It's about the clothes. When you're doing fashion photography, your subject is the clothes, and you're trying to find someone that looks great in clothing. So that's an important part, but your job is to adequately light and show the clothing. That's what fashion photography is about. It really is about the clothes. And so when you think, well, do I want to do fashion photography? That gives you an idea of what you'll be shooting. The kind of thing you're going to be shooting is that. You're going to be shooting the clothes. That's the thing. Maybe you may be shooting in a neat location, or you may be just doing it straight up on a studio on gray seamless, but that's it. You're really shooting, it's about the clothing, all right? Now, photos like these, they're still people, but it is a portrait of a person, but it's not really a portrait. That's about the place. That's travel photography. When you take these pictures where they don't really know that you're taking them, you're standing back 100 feet, and you're kind of slinking into an alley, and you're taking the picture. It's very creepy. But that's travel photography. They're not really necessarily, they're not portraits, but you could call them travel portraiture, but it's not really, and look how happy they were for me to have taken their photo. But these are travel shots is what they are, all right? So what is street photography? Street photography is really you're showing people capturing everyday life. That's really what street photography is. You're trying to stop a moment of just everyday life and capturing it and just nabbing a quick moment of it. That's street photography, all right? Next one is beauty photography. And this beauty photography is what you see when you walk in the first floor of Macy's. And every picture looks like this. White background, very, very close up, because beauty photography is about the makeup. It is literally about the makeup and the hair. And they have entire competitions, photographic competitions, that are just for the hairstyle, that are just for the makeup style, so things like that. Then there's glamour photography. Glamour photography is, you know. We're at a bar, right? So it's sexy. Sexy. So it really is, you're focusing on the subject's physical beauty. That's why I put so many pictures of myself out there. That's why you always see these shots of me. So that's what that's for. You know what that's for. There's also boudoir photography, which is for lovers. That is usually done in like a bedroom scene. And let's take a couple pictures. No, those are naughty. Let's look at lifestyle photography. Lifestyle photography is designed to make you feel jealous. No, that's not really it. It's about capturing social situations. People living a better life than you are, out there having fun, enjoying their friends at a coffee shop, hanging out. That is lifestyle photography, right? And this is a typical shot. Tell me you couldn't see this shot as like one of those ads for like drugs that you see at night on TV, medicines, right? Tell me that would not make. And you know what this thing? It's the disclaimers that when you read those at night, you read the disclaimer and you're like, it says, you'll probably die. You're gonna take this and there's a good chance no matter what it does for you good, at the end you're gonna die. Probably in the first week. Anyway, but that is lifestyle photography. It's showing people, they're older, they're happy, they just took their meds. You look at them. All right. Then there is environmental portraiture. So this is getting towards more, I think, classical portraiture. And in environmental portraiture, the background is very key to the story. For example, you have a ballerina shot backstage. The fact that she's backstage is in part of the story. And this is what you'll see a lot in magazines, where you're showing them in their environment because it's as important to the story as anything else. This is a U.S. Army Black Hawk helicopter rescue team. And having the helicopter in the shot is as important as anything. And you could even call, to some extent, wedding photography, if it's taken in a church, that it is also somewhat environmental, or taking this guy in a gym, or different athletes. This guy's backstage at a concert, an Olympic snowboarder, taken in a half pipe. So those are where the background behind them is just so important. It's critical to the story that you're trying to tell. But so what's a regular old portrait? A regular portrait it's different. It is a controlled situation where you are actually working with the subject. You're directing the shoot. It's not happening around you. It's like you are literally saying, okay, we're going to try to make this portrait, and you're working together, and that's your goal. The two of you are going to work together to try to make a portrait and to reveal something about them. You're coordinating with them. You're trying to tell the story of who they are. This gentleman, this is Blake, and he's a linebacker, and he comes in for the shoot, and he is the most quiet, soft-spoken, polite young man. He was just so nice, and I'm like, hey, so Blake, welcome. And he's like, hi. And I'm like, so you're a linebacker? Yes, sir. Are you sure? So it took me a while to get him to kind of get in the groove and, kind of become a linebacker. But what's nice about, I like this portrait of him because it's really kind of who he is when he's not a linebacker on the field. I asked him, I said, when you're on the field, are you like with your teammates in the huddle? We're going to play. Tough. Ready, everybody? He's like, no, sir. And I'm like, what are you like? And he just yells and took the roof off. I'm like, that's the guy I need for the rest of the shoot. But I got this before that. And so when I think of Blake, I think of the soft, happy Blake, soft-spoken, gentlemanly, But there's another side to him, and I was able to capture that later. You'll see that later. But that's what I'm working to tell the visual story of who this person is. We're working together and we're trying to get through that. So that's the typical portrait photography. That's mostly what we're going to be talking about the rest of this time. But I thought it was important to go through those styles. I know I just spent just a minute on it, but I think there's so many people who ask me these questions and like, well, I'm not sure which genre I'm shooting or what am I supposed to be doing. Wonderful quote from from Paul Campanegro Sr. And this nails it. It just nails it. All right, now, one of the things that I think will give you the best opportunity, the best chance for success is the importance of connecting with your subject, right? That is really going to make the biggest difference of anything. Most people don't like to have their photo taken, right? And as photographers, think about it. When was the last time you're like, hey, take my photo? No, our job is on this side of the camera, right? So imagine how uncomfortable your average person is. You're going to be shooting maybe headshots for like a vice president of a company, or you're shooting a portrait for a family and all. They're not like, I can't wait to go do this. You know, the mom wants to do it, but nobody else in the family wants to do it, right? So everybody's kind of uncomfortable to begin with. So your job is to make them comfortable. And if you ever get to listen to Peter Hurley talk about this subject, he is the world's best. My headshot that you see, the same headshot I used, was taken by Peter Hurley. I'm standing in front of his camera, and I'm feeling weird and all this stuff, and he says, turn your hips towards Canada. Click. He is so brilliant at making you forget that you're in front of the camera. That's like one of his gifts, and I think that's what you have to do. I want to give you a couple of pragmatic tips about this. For one of them is when someone first walks into your studio, or you're on location, you're out someplace shooting, you're in a park or whatever, the last thing that you want to do is you don't want to have your camera in your hand when you meet them. Because they know you can just go, hang on, click. They know in a split second you can take it, and they'll never be comfortable when you're holding the camera in your hand or you have it over your shoulder, because at any time you can take a picture and they get stuck. So make sure that when you first meet them, put your camera down and spend time just figuring out who they are. I just ask them all kinds of questions about their life and their family, but here's the big thing. I want to find out what their interests are. I want to find out what it is that they get passionate about and excited about. I was shooting a gentleman one time who was a doctor, and his hobby was toy trains. So once I found out it was toy trains, all I have to do is in the shoot start asking him about the trains. And he lights up. Literally, he becomes a different person. Now, he's animated, he's thinking about trains, and he's not thinking about the lens aiming at him. A lot of times with guys, I'll talk about sports. Like I'll go, hey, Tom Brady, right, retired the other day, right? Isn't that something? So who do you think they're going to get? What about the Jets? Who are the Jets going to get? So they obviously have a big problem at quarterback. What do you think, Aaron Rodgers? And he's like, no, he's not going to get it. Click. As soon as they respond negatively or positively, another great one I do is, if I'm talking to somebody, do you have kids? And they're like, yeah, I got 2 kids, a boy and a girl. Yeah, which one do you like better? Oh, come on, click. You can get so many great things as long as you don't mention politics. It's amazing the great things that you can get. Do you have a dog? Really, what kind of dog? Do you love your dog? That's a great one. Talk about dogs, cats, pets, people. But these are the things that you need to find out before, so when the shoot starts, you already know, you can already get them going. And getting that nobody says, you know what I want? I want a photographer that will get me in a pose, and I want a stiff-looking posed picture. Everybody says, what do you want in a portrait? I want it to look real. I want my smiles to look real. Now, I will say this. What I will do is, everybody has these, let me put my phone down for a second. Everybody has these poses that they do automatically. Like for men, it's the crossed arms, or they just stick their hands at their sides. Right? And so let them do that pose. So let the gentleman get in his pose, and they're like, I hate this, go ahead. And then once they get the pose shot, then now your job is to get the unposed shot. They've already done this, you have to give it to them, just give it to them. Just let them, you're gonna have, every first shoot starts with this. And then you start talking about football and sports and their kids and and then you just wait for them to start gesturing. Are you kidding me? We can't get him. We should take a draft pick. Click. This is the great thing about putting your camera on a tripod and using a remote. Now, today you can use a remote right off here. There's so many apps. Almost every camera, Fuji, Nikon, Sony, they all have a free app that will run your camera. If you have a camera that you bought in the last 3 years, you can actually fire it from your phone. You can just be sitting there going, really think they're going to get him? Click. Aaron Rodgers? Really? He's a nut. Click. You can just fire these things off all day long. All right? So there's that. Wonderful, wonderful quote from Albert Watson, very, very famous historical legend of photography. Now, this only works if you actually have a personality. If you're boring, it's going to be what it is. All right, here's another thing I do. I always play music on the set. I talk to so many photographers, I go, do you play music on the set? They go, oh yeah, man, I tell you, I love the Rolling Stones. I'm like, you're not supposed to play your favorite music. You're supposed to play their favorite music. Like, that's the idea, is to get them in a happy place. If I sit there and I'm shooting someone and they start dancing, I know I've nailed it. You've got Spotify. Just ask them, what kind of music do you like? Oh, I love hip hop. Oh, I love country, whatever it is. Bang, play country hits. Oh, what do you like, new country hits or old country? Play old country hits and just set your phone down, and all of a sudden they're literally dancing. The idea is to just get their mind off the fact that they're being photographed, because they probably hate it. Also, if you know you have a session coming up with somebody, just Google them. But don't just Google them to find out about them. Google them and hit the images button. So, Google brings you your text results. Hit images. I always want to see what other photographers have done with them, right? I always want to see, so what have other people done? What other photographs have they taken? So then I can make sure, all right, well, he doesn't look good on this side, or he does this, or he does that. You can get some, like you're on first base already. Now, here's the other thing I do, and this is a big, big helpful thing. Don't show them any of the photos until you get a killer shot of them. So here's why that changes things. So you're shooting, and you're taking shots, and you're looking, you're okay. And I always tell them, I never want it to get quiet on the set. If you're not talking, they're starting to think about things, and they're getting nervous, right? And they're getting worried. So I just constantly keep them talking, just about anything, right? And so I'm talking to them, and so if I start looking and I'm not seeing what I like, I don't go, you're not very attractive. No, I go, just messing with the settings, I'm working on the lighting, just give me a second here. I never want to tell them, because they're already like, do I look okay? Is he happy with what I'm doing? Is this all right? Once I finally get one that I know is a good one, I'm like, oh my gosh, stay right there, here, come, here, take a look. Look at that. Now, I'm not going to show them until I have a really good one. And once they see it, they're like, hey, that looks pretty good. When they step back in front of the camera, they're a completely different person. They just got a super boost of confidence. If they come by and see all your bad shots, they're going to be like, either this photographer's bad, or I'm bad, or we're both bad. But if they see a really good shot and they go, hey, this is coming out pretty good, it changes everything. You'll see, it's like flipping a switch on them. So I wait until I see the killer shot, I bring them back, and that's when I show them. All right, next. It's another quote, but it's a wonderful one from Sebastião Salgado. All right, that's number 2. Number 3, and this one's going to be kind of obvious, but I think it's really important. I think great light is so important. Great light is kind of the icing on the cake, right? So you do want to get a great expression, and that is really going to win the day. The artistic and the creative part is really going to win the day. But if you light it like you bought a flashlight from Home Depot, it's going to kind of kill the light, right? What I look for is a light source that flatters the subject. I just want people to look their very best. We can have certain lenses that are very flattering, right? They make people look great. We'll talk about those when we get to that. You can light people to make people look great. The bigger the softbox, the better they're going to look, the better you're going to look. So get the biggest softbox you can afford, and it makes everyone beautiful. It's almost like cheating. I remember years ago, it was an international competition. At the end of the competition, they had a challenge for the instructors. The instructors had 1 hour to make a portrait, and they could choose whatever gear they wanted. And then they all went out and shot for 1 hour, and they came back, and the audience judged the photos. Well, they took all the shots, and one of the photographers was a woman, which she had the best portrait by far. And later, one of the other photographers, a guy, is sitting there complaining about her. And his complaint was this: well, she used a huge softbox. Anybody can look good with a huge softbox. Bing! Wait a minute. Anybody, listen to that sentence. You can make anybody look good with a huge softbox. What was the next thing I bought? The biggest softbox I could afford, right? When you hear that, you're like, wow, and it's true. It's almost like cheating, right? So if you have great light, now that light it just has to be appropriate. The light could be appropriate for the subject, right? It could be, very appropriate. It could be, if if you're shooting a sports athlete, you don't want to make it soft and beautiful, right? But the light just has to be pretty and appropriate and flattering for the subject. So good light is always going to make a big difference, right? All right, and this is a lack of light, right? She's backlit. I had her in front of the same ballerina you saw earlier, in front of a white scrim, just one light blasting through it. And there's a little light leaking through, but all right. And this is a quote. Now, this guy started a small company. It wound up becoming a pretty big company. He did okay. The next thing is very interesting. And I think it's an important thing, and it's a bit of a controversial topic, but I think it's something that we need to talk about, which is responsible retouching. I think that we need to have retouching, and if you ever take a photograph of me, you better retouch it. You better retouch it to death. Keep going till I look like George Clooney. Just go. Just go. This is a great quote. I love her quote here. So why do we need retouching? I actually did a TEDx talk on this actual topic, like why do we need retouching in this day and age? And I'm going to show you an example, and it's an example I did in this talk. So this church that you see right here is up in Kennebunkport, Maine, and my family, every year we go there. It's like our family thing to do with the kids is to go up to Kennebunkport. And this church, we drive by it every day. As you're pulling into the little downtown area, it's so charming, there's this church on the right. And Taylor Swift used this in one of her videos because it's a very idyllic church. So I just took this is a snapshotty picture, right? I took this picture, and I've shown this picture to so many people who have been to Maine or live in Maine or know the area. And I asked them this question. It's a trick question. What's missing? I took something out in Photoshop. What is it? And they look at it and they said, well, was there a window in the middle? No. Was there somebody else on the porch? No. And we go through this, and no one's ever guessed it. And they're like, okay, I give up. What's missing? This. They're like, no way, you added that. I've seen that church 1,000,000 times. I've never seen those wires. That's exactly right. Thank goodness our brains were programmed to look at the beauty and to hide the junk. Now that I've said this, on your commute home, you're going to see power lines and telephone cables on a level you've never imagined. Because they're everywhere, but we just tune them out. We completely tune them out. Well, when I got home and I opened my laptop and I saw those wires, I'm like, this looks awful. This looks terrible. I would, if I was going to sell this, I would just call it, the name of the print would be Wires. It's awful. So I spent a long time taking out every one. This was before AI. There's now plugins that would just click one button called Erase Power Lines, and all of those lines would have been, the pole would have been there, but all the lines would have been gone. That pole would be easy to get rid of. But at that time, I had to do it manually. People are the exact same way. So when I meet you in person, you're a 3D object, right? You have a smell, you have movement, you have a vibe that you give off, a happy vibe, a mean vibe, a scary vibe, whatever your vibe is, a threatening vibe, whatever your vibe is, right? And there's all this to you. You're a 3D object with a personality and a smile and all this different stuff. When we take a photograph of somebody, and this is a misnomer, it's not that your flaws show up. Whatever flaws or imperfections you have are magnified. You will see things in a still photograph that you would have never seen in person, never. I'll give you a story. I was shooting a wedding with another photographer, and so he had a second shooter, was shooting the bride, beautiful bride. It was a beautiful day. We took 4,000 photos, 3,995 of the bride and 5 shots of the groom. Nobody cares about the groom. No one will ever buy a groom shot. They don't even really need to be there. So we took all these pictures. Now, the bride wore a strapless gown, and we took all these pictures. I spent literally 8 hours with her following around and just everything, right? I get home, and I thought, well, you know what? I want to throw some photos up so she can put them on Facebook. I opened the very first photo, and I'm like, oh my gosh. On her shoulder, it looked like someone hit her with a Zit grenade. It was really just horrendous, like, I never saw it. 8 hours, thousands of photographs, I never saw it. but when you open the photograph, it was literally the first thing I saw. So I called my second shooter, and I said, hey, did you notice anything about the bride? Anything? Anything like, blemish, anything? No, she's beautiful. I know. Open up one of the photos. He says, okay. And all I hear, honest to goodness, across the phone is, oh, dude, what's that on her shoulder? Nobody saw it. It's not there. Now, if it is something permanent, what we do is we don't remove it. We reduce its intensity. Because if you take it away and everybody knows, then it just says, you might as well write, this was retouched. All their friends will know, all their family will know, they'll be whispering, retouching, they retouched it, her mole is gone. So you don't want that, right? But you want to reduce its intensity. So that's why I think it's so important. We see people the same way. And so what our goal is, when we're retouching, is to make them look like they did when we were standing in front of them, right? So if we have to reduce things, I think luckily we're past the days where magazine covers make people ridiculously thin and all. I think the industry has woken up to that, but still it's going to be in our hands now, right? And we have to do responsible retouching. I want them, and if I realize they're starting to look way better than they did in person, I've crossed over, I've left the responsible retouching, and now I'm into an area that's not healthy for any of us. It's not good for them, it's not good for anybody. I will tell you this about retouching, and I learned this the hard way years ago, and it was a personally heartbreaking but enlightening moment. I took a candid shot of a friend of mine at a trade show, and I retouched it in Photoshop, and she looked fantastic. She looked like she did when I saw her. But I showed her the photo, and I said, hey, what do you think? And she's like, oh my gosh, you got to send me copies. Can I get prints? Can I get 8x10s and 5x? And she starts giving me her whole order, and I'm writing it all down. And she's like, I love that. That's one of my favorite pictures ever. I'm like, really? You like it? Let me tell you what I did. I got rid of these blemishes. I got rid of those wrinkles under your eyes. I got all this stuff. And you had this nasty scar on your forehead. And I made you look thinner. And I tucked in your cheeks. And I got rid of that. And I started telling, I was so impressed with all the Photoshop stuff I did. And I started telling her. And I could see like the life going out of her. And she said, you know what? That's okay. I don't really want the pictures. Here I did this great thing for her. I showed her like I really see her, but then I told her what was in the secret sauce. When we do a retouch, we have to not share that ever. But I will tell you this, everybody knows that there's Photoshop. Everybody knows how Photoshop works. So if somebody says, did you retouch this photo? I go, I did. I did a couple of things. Number one, you had a little thing on your arm. I took that out, and you had some stray hairs coming off your head. I removed those. And they go, that's it? And I said, that's it. I don't care if I spent 6 weeks. I don't care if I took those photos to a team of retouchers in Stade, and they worked on them for 6 weeks. When that thing comes back and I hand it to the client, there's a little thing on. Luckily, there's a little thing on everyone's arm. I've never had someone say, there's nothing on my arm. And they're like, oh, thank you. And you had some stray hairs that look kind of funky. I got rid of those. That's it. That's it. So leave it at that. All right, that's our goal. So our stated goal is responsible retouching, make them look like they did when they were standing in front of our camera. This is a funny quote from George Hurl. He's one of the most famous, portrait photographers forever. It's all so simple, and no one believes me. Number 5, I think good color and skin tone is really important. And there is no international skin tone thing, right? You have to make a judgment call. Everybody should not have the same skin tone. It should be all varied, and it should look right for that person. So I think whatever that skin tone is, I'll tell you what a great secret to getting at least an accurate skin tone, and then you can decide if it's good or not. The greatest thing in the world is a gray card. All right, and I have, this one is made from Last Light. It folds up inside your camera bag. It's about this big, and it pops into that. You just have your subject hold it in the very first frame, right? And then here's what you do. When you take it into Lightroom or Camera Raw in Photoshop, go to the basic panel, you grab that big eyedropper, and you just take it. It is called the white balance selector tool. And you click on that gray card that is 18% gray. You click it once, and it fixes your color. Now, that gives you an accurate color, right? So look at the one on the left, which is so blue, right? And then a lot of times I find that I don't recognize how off the color is until I fix it. Like once I fix it, then I realize, how far off we are. So And this one was off by quite a bit. So that's it. You click once, but it gives you accurate, which is great for product photography, but sometimes for people you have to look at it and go, does their skin tone look right? That's accurate, but is it flattering? Most people look good with a slightly warmer skin tone, so an accurate one might be, okay, that's a good starting place, and now I'm gonna add a little more yellow into it. Just move the temperature slider 1/32 of an inch and you'll probably be there. All right, so this is it. It's $39.90. I know, don't mention my name at B&H. You won't get a discount or anything. I don't get a kickback. There's nothing that comes out of it. I'm just telling you because, and you just hold it in the frame too, just to have your assistant. Look how surprised he is. Is this okay? Is it okay right here? Yeah, that's fine, really. All right, number 6. The eyes are so important, and I love this quote. It's a Romanian proverb. The eyes have one language everywhere. It is such an important part. When I'm doing retouching, this is where I'm going to spend the most time. Because we look at the photo and that is what we focus on. It's not just what we focus on in the camera, right? We're going to take our camera, we're going to put our focus dot right on that center point of the eyes, right? That's the first spot we're going to go to. But literally and figuratively, when people look at the image, that's what they're going to focus on, right? It's the first thing the viewer connects with is the eyes. So I always make sure that I'm going to spend a reasonable amount of the time making the eyes look good, all right? And the reason why is your subject, are their emotions expressed through their nose? Right? It's really the eyes where their emotions are expressed. No one said, I could tell by the look in their nose they were unhappy. And I could tell from their nose they were overjoyed, right? And this is a wonderful quote. All right. This next one's interesting. The background matters more than you think. In fact, the background is probably going to be more of the success of your photo than your foreground is. Your person is going to be interesting, but if you have a background that is distracting, and that's one of the things that I see so often is distracting backgrounds. That's why it is so important to have a simple, clean background. So let's take a look at some magazine covers real quick, all right? Because they all have something in common. I just grabbed a couple this is a Google search. That's Fast Company, here's Cosmo, here's Wired, here's Time. What do they all have in common? A seamless paper, right? And that's what they do. Now, a lot of times, they're going to shoot on a roll of gray seamless, and they're going to change the background to whatever color they want. And it's like a 5-second job in Photoshop, especially if you shot in gray, right? It's the easiest thing in the world to change it to whatever color you want. But a roll of seamless is one of the best investments. Now, what you can do is, if you're like, I'm really tight on my budget, buy a roll of white paper. So white paper, and don't get the short one. You're going to want to buy the 54-inch one because it's really inexpensive. And what you'll wind up doing is spending a ton of time in Photoshop extending the edges, right? Because it's so hard to, unless you're strictly doing headshots. If you do even like a 2/3 shot, now you're fighting the edges. So buy the like 109-inch, buy the long one. The shipping's free at B&H. So get the long one. So anyway, but it really makes a huge difference if you get the longer one. If you buy white, here's how it works. It's 4 backgrounds. Number 1 is you have to light white to be white. If you put up a white background and you don't put lights on it, you don't put flashes or strobes or something on it, it'll never be white. So you've got white if you put a background light on it. If you don't put a background light on it, you have light gray. Move your subject 5 feet forward, you have dark gray. Move them another 5 feet forward, it's black. Solid black background. So you have white, light gray, dark gray, and black from one, all right? And it's cheap. If you get the 53-inch, it's $20. If you get the 109, and this is the Savage is the ones I use. They have a nice gray if you like. If you do a lot of fashion, they have a thing called just fashion gray. But Savage, get the 109-inch, it's $40. It's double the price, and it's tremendously better. So, all right. So, what if you're not shooting on location? In that case, why do we put the background out of focus? To separate the subject from the background. When you blur that background, it simplifies the background. That's it. And I think that does, when you talk about what makes a great portrait, I don't want to see, unless the background is important to the story, and I'm composing it for it to be important to the story, I want that background really out of focus and creamy. All right, next, this is a surprising one. what a role the lens that you choose makes in how your portrait's gonna look. Now, of course, we know there's certain lenses that are really nice for portraiture, right? But your lens selection, there's a couple of tricky things about it. Now, one of the most popular lenses is an 85 millimeter. I know people that shoot an entire wedding and they never change the lens the entire time. It's 85, they take one lens to the wedding and they shoot the whole thing and the shots look great. And an 85 has a very kind of special look to it, right? However, here's what I want to talk to you about. And I grabbed these prices off of B&H, right? So we're looking at 85 millimeter f1.8 is $426, okay? If you want to get the same lens in 85 millimeter, but instead of f1.8, you want to get it for 1.4, look at the difference. What? So from f1.8 to f1.4 is a difference of $1,169 for that extra stop. Now, I had a portrait subject and I shot one at f1.4 and one at f1.8. Which one's which? It's a $1,200 question. All right, so which one? No, both of them. That would have been a good trick question. No, it's that. All right, but whether you get it right or you get it wrong, it doesn't really matter. What matters is that you see that the difference between them is so slight. Is it a $1,200 difference? Now, the other lens is going to be lighter and easier to carry. It's going to take up less weight, and it's going to look about the same. Now, another lens that I love, this is my favorite go-to lens, is a 70-200. Now, here's what you're going to say. Scott, if you have a 70-200, why do you need 85? Why don't you just take your 70-200 and go to 85? Because it doesn't look the same. An 85 millimeter prime lens has its own like special funky look that looks just right. And setting a 70-200 at 85 does not look the same. It looks different. Even though the millimeters are the same, the look is not the same. Now, you can do the same thing here. I've used this f4. It's super sharp. It's $649 for a 70-200. It's lighter. It's much lighter. It's about the same size, but it's lighter. If you want the same exact lens and you want to go just to f2.8, it's $2,099. So there's a tremendous difference in price, but there's also something else. So when you're going to grab your lens, you're sitting there, you're looking at the camera bag, and you go, I'm going to shoot. There's a big difference here. So first off, this is a wide-angle shot. Now, wide-angle shots for people generally are not very flattering. You have to be really, really good with a wide-angle lens to get flattering shots of people. Now, if you're doing an environmental portrait, you're going to need a wider lens, right? But you got to be careful. And I know what you're thinking. Scott, I see Joe McNally shooting with a wide-angle lens all the time. Two things. Number one, you're not Joe McNally. Number two, Joe McNally is a magical unicorn. Whatever that guy shoots, he could shoot you with just like the pan out of the bottom of a Jiffy Pop popcorn thing and put a piece of film there and you take a picture that'll win an award. He's on a whole different plane. We can never ever use Joe McNally as an example for anything ever because he's just so flippin' good. He's weird. All right. But we're living in a regular world where we have to have crutches like choosing the right lens and stuff, right? So in this picture, this isn't a terrible photo, but it's not super flattering. I know I could reach down there and grab another lens that would be more flattering, but there's something else, and it's about the background. When you make the choice of shooting, this is a shot with a 24 millimeter, right? 24 to 70, so I was somewhere in the 24 millimeter range. Look at the boats back here. Look at those boats back there. I'm going to change no settings on the camera. I'm not going to change a single thing. I'm just going to switch lenses. So I had my assistant standing beside me. I take the shot. I try not to move my camera. He hands me the new lens. I slot it into place, and I take the same shot again. But I take the same shot with not a wide angle. I shot it with a telephoto. So first was a 24, now a 70-200. I think the portrait's going to look better. I think it's more flattering for her face, but look at the boat. See how far back that boat is? I'm shooting from the same spot. I haven't moved 1 inch. Look how close the boat is now. That compression that the lens creates is going to change how the background looks as well. It makes a big, big difference on how the depth of the background looks. So if you want the background to be closer, shoot it with a long lens. If you want the background to appear farther away, wide-angle lenses push stuff away. Now, there's also a 50 millimeter lens. And I know that you've seen pictures on the web, and there's some people that are really good at shooting with a 50. I could never tell a friend, we're sitting at the bar, I would never tell you to use a 50 on people. Now, especially if you get it close up. A close-up lens on people looks really, really bad because you get distortion. And I'll give you an example. I shot one with a 50 and one with a telly. Look at the one on the left. You wouldn't know it. You wouldn't realize it was distorted until you saw it with the telly. Same person, everything's the same. I just changed the lens. That is the only difference between these two shots. No settings, no nothing. But there you can see facial distortion on the left that you will get that you won't get with a telephoto. Telephotos are like that big softbox. It's kind of cheating. Stand back and zoom in, and you're going to have a great experience. All right, it's not the right word, but enter one in your mind. All right, we're almost done. Number 9, emotion and expression. This is such an important part of this whole thing, right? This is why you talk to them at the beginning, and you can get happy expressions, you can get sad expressions. Remember I talked about this gentleman, Blake, earlier? So when we finally got Blake to start yelling, right, we took a spray bottle and sprayed him in the face. That really made him mad. It was surprising. No, we told him it was coming. He was totally cool with it. But if you do need to get someone mad, a spray bottle works wonders if you don't tell them. But we told him we're going to do a spray bottle and stuff, and we got him to start yelling and all this stuff, and it completely changed. And I'm saying, you know, show me what you're like in the huddle, and then we got this shot. Now, the thing about this is what's interesting about Blake. He looks really tough here, and he is. But do you know that this shot was taken when he was in high school? Now, he went on to play college ball. I'd hate to line up across from him, and I'd go, I'm going to die soon. Nicest guy in the world off the field. I got to imagine he was a killer on the field. But you have to work to get that expression. He doesn't walk in and just first shot, he's like, you know, he walks in, hello, how are you? It's just, it takes time. You got to, and whether they're going to be happy, see, can you tell music's playing? And it's loud. I have the music playing really, really loud in the studio when we do that. And this one, this is not a model. This was an architect, but he's obviously upset. We were trying to tell this story, and we rented a theater and put a smoke machine up, and there's a flashback behind him. And we're trying to tell him that the story we're telling is you've been writing and writing and writing, and the song's not just coming. My wife and I did a whole series of photos that were based on song titles, and so and this was one of them. And we tried to get him to like make your hair messy, look upset, and you're just looking into the music and you don't know what's next. Sometimes if it's a professional model, you can tell them, yeah, I want the look of surprise, or I want you to be reflective or whatever. This is an interesting trick that I've used over the year. In the studio, when we get our spot and we have our lighting set, we take a piece of black gaffer's tape and we mark an X on the floor. And what's neat is when your subject gets off that mark, you'll say, hey, don't forget to get on your mark. They always look down. And I always shoot the shot with them because it looks like very solemn. And he's really going, where's that X on the floor? But you don't see that in the shot. This is a wonderful quote from Bert Stern. Of course, solid composition is really important, right? Obviously, if it's not composed well, if it's composed funky. Every Wednesday I host a podcast. It's a video show. And once a month we do a thing called Blind Photo Critiques. We ask people to send in their images and we critique them. And we say it's blind because we don't say the person's name. So we don't say who the photographer's name is. And we get so many photos of portraits like this. Look how much headroom there is above her head. That is typical for what we see when people send in photos. It's very, very common because for some reason they think the eyes should be in the middle of the photo. They actually should be up much higher. And if you want to shoot more contemporary, how you'd really be shooting today, you'll actually cut off the top of the head. You just have to make sure you cut off enough of the top of the head to look okay. Don't cut off their chin. That looks funky. But top of the head is, you open a magazine and every shot's going to look like this today. If it's not a full body shot or something, they're all close. It makes the portrait much more interesting when you come in close like that. Now, I'll also see a lot of shots like this where, look, her fingertips are cut off. There's not quite, if you don't cut off enough of the head, it looks like a mistake. And people look at your photo and they go, oh, it's too bad you cut off the top of her head. If you cut off enough of it, nobody ever notices. It looks regular. But if you cut off just the tip, it looks funky. You need like a full third. Also, anytime you're cropping a photo or you're cropping it in camera when you're making your frame, it looks awkward if you cut people like right at their joints, like at their elbows or their knees and stuff. I'll give you an example, right? Take a look at the one on the left. If you crop just below their knees, it looks a little funky. If you move up a little bit, it just makes a big difference. Now, I said we were going to do 10 things, but we have one bonus thing, which is what we call number 11. Okay, so, and I wanted to say this one to last because it makes people so angry that I need to get off stage quickly. So let's take a look at this shot, because we're going to talk about the importance of subject. This is a hamburger, all right? Let's take a look at it. It is sesame seed bun, burger, cheese, lettuce, and tomato, all right? So that's the shot. Here's the same thing, hamburger, lettuce, tomato, cheese, and sesame seed bun. Shot in the same lighting, shot everything is the same. You have to hire a photographer to do your shoot. Which are you going to choose? Is it A or B? So both photographers have the same skill, but if I had to look at these two pictures and make a choice, we're all going to choose B, even though the photographer didn't really make a difference. Which one would you hire if you had to hire one? Of course, you would hire B. Why? Because the subject looks so much better. Each of those photographers, you're given a burger and you're given a burger. Now, when it comes to food styling, right, that second photo was styled, right? They hired somebody to come in and make that burger look great. But what if you're standing in front of the bad burger and you don't have a stylist? And this is a bigger picture of portraiture. If you don't think you're a very good portrait artist, maybe it's because the person you've been photographing isn't very attractive. Maybe your cousin's just ugly. And you've been shooting them and you're thinking, I'm just not good at this. But then someone who's really photogenic, and there are people who in real life look regular and in front of the camera look amazing. And the exact opposite's true. There are people who look amazing in front of the camera, and you put them in front of the lens, and they just don't photograph like they do in person. People with very round faces look wonderful in person and they don't photograph very well. People with very angular faces look really, really good in photography. It's how the light and the camera capture the image. It's how do you describe someone who's photogenic? Someone who looks great in front of the camera. My niece, Sarah, is like that. She takes selfies. If she just holds it up, if I take the camera, just boom, take a shot of her, she looks fantastic in every photo. It's not that she has some magical thing that she does. It's just that her facial structure looks fantastic. And so if you have that, if you're shooting someone that looks fantastic, what's your shot going to look like? It's going to look fantastic. And all of a sudden, you're going to be like, hey, I can't shoot portraits. That's how important the subject you're standing in front of is, right? And I made an example for you. So we're on location, and I took this shot of our subject. Now, I'm not going to change any camera settings. I'm not going to change the lens. I'm not going to change a single thing. I'm going to have her step out of the frame, and I'm going to have my assistant step in the frame. All right, so that's the shot of her, and then he's going to step in. It just doesn't look the same, right? And I know what you're thinking. That's not a fair comparison, Scott, because she had long hair. Look, the hair isn't not going to help. It's not going to help. If you're standing in front of Melvin, your shot's not going to come out looking like this. And so this is really important. This is something that we have to realize is a truth. It's a reality of this. And the reality of this is that you're going to get what you're standing in front of. If you are shooting someone very, very photogenic, you're going to get a very good shot. You don't have to be a genius portrait photographer to get someone that looks great in all circumstances. And that's why people become professional models. They became professional models because they are super photogenic. Now, what's amazing is how inexpensive it is to when you're learning portrait photography, to hire a professional model for a couple of hours, right? They can go for anywhere between $25 to $100 an hour. Think of the money that we spend on a lens, right? You're going to spend $2,000 to get a better portrait, where if you spent $75 and had somebody come in for an hour, that'll let you and you get to tell them, look, I'm just learning this stuff. I'm just getting started in this. Can you just do some poses, and I'm going to try to figure out what's what and all. And I've never had a model in all of these years ever do anything but like, absolutely, I'm happy to do it. And they'll pose for you and be patient and be nice the whole entire time. And you'll come back with pictures that you go, son of a gun, I can be a portrait photographer. because you were shooting someone that is, you're stacking the deck. It's just like when you're shooting landscape photos. If you stand in front of an amazing landscape, what are your chances of getting a great photo? You could actually train a small dog to run up the leg of your thing, hit the button, and go. My dog would do anything for a treat. If I put a treat on the shutter button, that dog would go through whatever it had to do to get to that shutter button. So that's the thing. If you start off with something that looks great, it doesn't take a whole lot, especially with today's cameras. You could leave it in auto mode and you're going to get a great shot. Now, I had talked about this previously, and a gentleman left me a note, and I want you to, this is his comment. It was on the comment cards. How about showing how you would shoot non-attractive people? Well, I thought that was kind of mean, the whole above average people getting married. But anyway, shooting pretty people is easier. Actually, it's not. It's just the results look so much better, right? The results look great. If you shoot pretty people, well, do you ever go to a wedding photographer's website and it's like a parade of ugly brides? No, the brides look phenomenal. The grooms all look like George Clooney. They're amazing, which is pretty old for a groom. Anyway, but no, they have bride and grooms. It's like and you think to yourself, has this photographer never shot an average wedding like this gentleman was talking about when he put that comment in? No, it's just they know when you look at that, you want to picture you in that scene, and you picture, wow, these are the kind of photographs I want. You know, but then if you show up and you're Jabba the Hutt, you're going to get a picture that looks like that, not like the ones on their site. But that's the thing. When you're standing in front of something that looks great, it's very easy to get a great shot. Now, I don't want you to leave here today and say, Scott said I only have to shoot beautiful people. Because I want you to go on Twitter and say, Scott said you can only shoot beautiful people. No, you can shoot interesting people. Interesting people make really, really interesting photos. So you don't have to, it's not beautiful, it's just they look good, they're photographic, they look great she's 63 years old. And we were doing a commercial shoot, and she was one of the models hired for the shoot, and I said, you gotta let me take your portrait. So there's Blake. So they can be interesting. Jay Maisel. Now, I want to tell you something. A friend of mine was the lead photographer for Kraft Foods, and he showed me something interesting one day, and it was about how looks matter. And if you take a look at the cover or the box shot of any box of Kraft macaroni and cheese, you know what you'll notice about it? You don't see any of the eyes of the noodles. There's not a single eye on any macaroni and cheese box. Do you know why? Because a food stylist that works at Kraft takes a pair of tweezers and turns every single one of them, so you never see an eye facing at you. Because the eye doesn't look good. If you see the eye, it's a little freaky. And they pay a professional to turn their, what'd you do today, honey? I turned the macaroni. Oh yeah. Is that what the kids are calling it these days? Right? Turning the macaroni. I turned the macaroni. All right, now, so that's not post-processing, right? That's pre-processing. That's you're on the set. However, this afternoon at 3 o'clock, I'm going to do a bunch of portrait post-processing stuff. So I invite you to come. It's at 3 o'clock. It's upstairs on the 3rd floor at the exposure stage. Thank you guys very much. Appreciate your attention.